Okay, so this is my day 5 on 100 days of code challenge, and up until now I have been going through the freeCodeCamp's responsive web design certification course, and I have completed 3 sections up until now. And today I'm going to start with this HTML forms section by building a registration form. So let's start the project. Let's put our HTML declaration there. Let's open a new HTML tag and also close it, and let's give it a language attribute of English. Now let's put head and body tags inside our HTML element. And also let's put our title tag inside our head, and title is going to be registration form. And let's put our meta tag, which will define the character set, and the value is going to be UTF-8. Now let's link to a style sheet called styles.css. So relation is style sheet, and href is going to be styles.css. Okay, let's give this a header, and the text is going to be header registration form. Okay, below the heading, use the following text within a paragraph element to encourage users to register. Okay, so let's create a paragraph element and let's copy this text. I'm going to paste the text here. Okay, so now we are talking about VH unit, which stands for viewport height and is relative to 1% of the height of the viewport. It is time to spruce the project up with some CSS. Begin by giving the body a width of 100% and a height of 100 of viewport height. So let's select the body using the element type selector, and let's give it width of 100% and height of 100 viewport height. Yeah, so if I were to go on and put a border in here, then we can see that the height of this body is going to be 100% of this viewport. So if I do 50, then it would be half of the viewport. That's not 50, that's 500. Yeah, so it's just half of what is available in here, half of the space. Let's go with 100 VH. Now get rid of the horizontal scroll bar by setting the body default margin to margin 0. Okay, let's give it a margin 0, and then the scroll bar disappears. If I were to comment this out, then we have a vertical scroll bar in here and horizontal scroll bar in here, but when I say margin 0, then that disappears. Now make the background easy on the eyes. Okay, background color, let's copy this hex value cannot see any text, so let's change the color of the text also. Yeah, that is better. It's suggested by the title, you are creating a form. So after the P element, insert a form with an action attribute targeting this URL. Let's create a form, and the action is going to be submitting this form to this URL. Yeah. The method attribute specifies how to send form data to the URL specified in the action. Okay. The form data can be sent via a GET request as URL parameters with method is equals to get, or this is I think the default value, default behavior, or via a post request is data in the request body with method is equals to post. So let's select our method for form submission to be post. So instead of sending it via the URL, what we are going to do is we are going to submit the data inside this form. Is the data will be sent inside the request body instead of the query parameters inside URL. Okay, set the method attribute to send your form data via post request. This is what should be. Your method attribute should be set to post. Okay, so I had to write it in all lowercase. Is the form will have 3 distinct sections. Add 3 field set elements within the form element. Okay, so we are going to have 3 field sets. Now the first field set will hold name, email and password fields. Start by adding 4 label elements to the first field set. Okay, so name, email and password. Okay, so let's add label. This is going to have a for attribute and label. So we were supposed to add 4 labels. Yeah, and the following text to the label elements. Okay, so let's enter your first name, enter your last name, enter your email and create a new password. The rem unit stands for root em and is relative to the font size of HTML element. As label elements are inline by default, they are all displayed side by side on the same line, making their text hard to read. Yeah, so here they are all displayed side by side because they are inline element. To make them appear on separate lines, add display block to the label element and add a margin of 0.5 rem and 0 to separate them from each other. Okay, let's select the label elements and let's display them as block elements. So this is going to cause them to, this should have caused them to go to the next line. Okay, there is a colon there instead of semicolon. Okay, now it works. So now they are on separate lines. Now we need to put some margin so that there is some spacing in between them. So 0.5 of root em Yeah, and 0. Yeah, so this will set top and bottom margin to, I think it's uh, 8 pixels, because 16 pixels is, I think, the default font size of HTML element, and 0 is, so left and right margins are set to be 0 for this label element. Now this should pass. Now nest an input element within each label. Okay, so within the label element we are supposed to nest input. Yeah, be sure to add each input after the label text and include a space after the colon. So yeah, maybe it wants me to do it like this. So let's just copy this, and I'm going to paste it here, here, and here. So we have our inputs rendered. Following the accessibility best practices, link the input elements and the label elements together using for attribute. Use first name, last name, email, and new password as values for respective IDs. Okay, so all of these inputs must have an ID. So this is going to have an ID of first name. Let's just copy this. This is going to have an ID of last name. Then this is going to have an ID of email, and this is going to have an ID of new password. And now all of these ones are going to be linked to these label elements with a for attribute. First dash name, last dash name, email, and a new password. Yeah, nothing changes in the view here. So specifying the type attribute of a form element is important for the browser to know what kind of data it should expect. If the type is not specified, the browser will default to text. Give the first two input elements a type of text. So this is going to be text type. This is also going to have the text type. The third one is going to have an email type, and the fourth one is going to have a password type. Yeah, so yeah, the email type only allows emails with a at and a dot in the domain. The password type obscures the input and warns if the site does not use HTTPS. Yeah, so depending on the type of the input field, it behaves differently. For example, I could write anything, any text inside this text type, and it would work. But if I were to try to submit a form with this kind of email, then it will not allow me to submit, because this text does not contain an at sign or a dot sign. So that's the minimum requirement. And for the password field, uh, it automatically masks whatever you type in here. So that's the behavior of the that's how the browser knows how to render these forms and render the values and validate the values inside these fields. Also, if I were to remove, right now it's suggesting me, if when I focus on this field, it's suggesting me some email and also the password associated with that email. But if I were to remove this type here from here, then it's not going to suggest me the email anymore and not the password. So for auto filling the information also, this is it's helpful to include these types inside the input. The first input element with the type of submit is automatically set to submit its nearest parent form element. To handle the form submission, after the last field set element, add an input element with the type attribute set to submit and the value attribute set to submit. Okay, so the first input that has this type of submit type attribute set to submit, when we click on this one, then it automatically submits this form. So what we can do is this will render as a button and the default value is submit here. So I can give it something else like submit form. Then the label of this button would be submit form, but if I don't give anything, then the default value is going to be submit. Yeah. At this point you should be able to submit the form. However, you might notice not much happens. Okay, if I submit, normally this form would be submitted, it works, this will be submitted to this URL. Okay, to make the form more interactive, add the required attribute to the input elements in the first field set. Yeah, so in the first field set, what we are going to do is we are going to say this name is going to be a required attribute, this is going to be a required attribute. Yeah, so this required attribute I think is very self-explanatory. So if we don't fill any data in the input that has this required attribute, then the browser performs the validation on this input field, and if it's empty, then it does not allow us to submit the form. So if I do this, yeah, the browser tells please fill in this form. So I have to fill in these values. Only when all of these fields have some value, they are allowed to be submitted. And for this email, actually it has to be a valid email, so please include an @ in email address. And if I do this, include a dot, so now this is a valid email and I can submit my form. Certain type attribute values come with built-in form validation. Okay, that's what I was just demonstrating. For example, type email requires that value to be a valid email address. Add a custom validation to the password input by adding a min length attribute with a value of 8. Doing so prevents inputs of less than 8 characters being submitted. Yeah, so right now it is required, but we can just have a password like password have the value 1, and then it will allow us to submit the form. But now we can add a validation here saying minimum length should be 8. Minimum length should be 8, and then it will not allow us to submit the form if the number of characters inside this input field is less than 8. So that's nice. Oh, there is one. Didn't I just say never save password for this site? With type is equals to password, you can use the pattern attribute to define a regular expression that the password must match to be considered valid. Okay, so now that's another layer in the validation. So we say the password is required, and we say it must be at least 8 characters long, and then now we are going to add another validation that uh, by writing a regular expression which will validate that we have at least 8 characters and only lowercase letters are allowed and numbers from 0 to 5 are allowed. So if I were to include a 6 in the password, then it would not be a valid password. So let's go on and include that. Pattern is going to be A to Z, 0 to 5, and it should be 8 characters or more. And if I were to go on and put some other characters, okay, this is still allowing me to submit this. Okay, let's see why is it allowing me. Yeah, we don't need the min length attribute actually, because the pattern takes care of the min length. So let's go on and give it a password that shouldn't be valid. For example, if it's shorter than 8 characters, it should not be valid. Okay, the pattern is not working for some reason. Let's see. If I submit my code, maybe I'll get some hint. Yeah, that's what I have given. Oh, okay, so this, I included a space in there. This is so annoying. I'm going to go to my password manager and remove this saved password, so it doesn't ask me every time I change the password. So the Google saved the updated password. Let's see. Yeah, so now I have deleted the saved password, so it should not suggest me anything in here, and also it should not ask me to update the password. But let's try the validation now. So if we give some value in here, and let's give it a valid email, and let's try to submit with less than 8 characters. Yeah, is not the requested format. So if I have more than 8 characters, but I'm going to include some numbers that are not supposed to be there, then yeah, so this is working. Actually, I can show you if I remove type is equals to password, then I can show you what I am entering in here. So for example, if I do this and if I put a 9 in there, although it's going to be longer than 8 characters, because 9 is not an allowed character, it should not let us submit the form. Yeah, but as soon as I remove the 9, then it should let us submit. Yeah, so this is how validation is working. Let's go back and set this to not text type is going to be password. Yeah, if we submit, yeah, now the test passes. Let us go to the next part of the registration form. This section will ask for the type of account the user is opening. Okay, start by adding 2 label elements to the second field set. So label, and I have added 2 label elements. since both of the labels are empty now, we cannot see any changes in the form. So I'm going to submit and go to the next exercise. Users will be allowed to choose either a personal or business. To do this, within each of the first two label elements, add one input element with type radio. Okay, input, and this is going to be a radio. Input type is going to be radio. Yeah, so we can see those radio buttons in here. So let's go to the next challenge. Within each corresponding label element and immediately after the input, add a space. Okay, and then add the following text. So what we are supposed to do is have personal and business. So now we can see there it's personal and business. You only want one radio input to be selectable at a time. However, the form does not know the radio inputs are related. Yeah, so we need to give it name attribute on both of the input elements, and they need to have the same name so that only one value is selectable at one time. So now if I select person is selected, but if I go on and select business, person will be unselected and then only business will be selected. Currently, when someone submits the form, they can submit it without checking the radio input. Yeah, so right now there is no validation for this thing. Although you had used required attribute to indicate the input is required previously, this can't work in this case because adding required to both inputs will convey the wrong information to the form users. Yeah, so we cannot put required to both of them. So to solve this, you can provide context of what is needed by adding a legend element below the second field set with the text, account type, and required. Yeah, so that's the first task is to add a legend, and let's give some information about this section of the form. So yeah, so now we can see that this section is for account type, and then this is a required selection. And now what we can do is we can check the personal by default so that we always have at least one value from either of these two options. So if the user does not change anything and submits, then the personal is selected, but if user goes on and changes, then business will be submitted. Follow accessibility best practices by linking the input elements and the label elements in the second field set. Okay, so what we are going to do is add a for attribute, and for attribute is going to have some value, personal account. Actually this is going to be business account. And this is going to be personal, this is going to be business. And now I'm going to give these inputs an ID. This is going to be business account, and this is going to be personal account. So now if I were to click on this business text, then this checkbox will this radio will be selected, and if I click on personal, then this will be selected. You need to confirm that the user has read the terms and conditions. Add a label element inside the newly created label element. Add an input element and set the type attribute to checkbox. Okay, so was it supposed to be inside the, so it does not mention anything about including this new label inside field set. So let's just do it out here. So label, and then label will have an input which is going to have a type of checkbox. Make this input required, so users cannot sign up without agreeing to terms and conditions. Yeah, so this is required. And add an ID and for attribute with the value terms and conditions to the elements for accessibility. So I'm going to give this an ID terms and conditions, and I'm going to copy this, and inside the for attribute I'm going to paste this. And it does not mention what label should we give to this checkbox. Maybe that's coming next. Yeah, so this is the labels text, and it should be okay. Add this text to the newly added label, then link the text, terms and conditions to the following location. Okay, and should it be on the right side of the input or left side? I think it should be on the right side of the input. I accept the terms and conditions. Yeah, and now we are going to make these terms and conditions a link by wrapping it inside an anchor element, and the href of this anchor is going to be this link. Yeah, so it should work. So now this is a link, and I suppose in the next challenge or next exercise we are going to be styling this differently, because it's not very readable right now. Moving on to the final field set. What if you wanted to allow a user to upload a profile picture? Well, the input type file allows just that. Add a label with the text upload a profile picture. So let's add a label and add a text upload a profile picture, and nest an input accepting a file upload. So let's go on here and give it a type of file. So this will allow us to choose a file from our computer. Add another label after the first with the text input your age. Okay, I think we were supposed to do it here. Label, and this is going to have input your age, and the age should be in years. And this is going to have an input with a type of number. Yeah, so I can choose my age from here. Next, add a minimum attribute to input with the value of 13. Okay, so this should be at least 13. So this is also another validation, so we are validating a number. So any value less than 13 will not be submitted. Also, users probably will not be over the age of 120. Yeah, I would guess so. Now if someone tries to submit the form with the values outside of the range, a warning will appear and the form will not submit. Give it a try. Okay, let's give it a try. So if I were to submit 2 years and I accept submit, okay, first I have to input a valid email. Now yeah, so value must be greater than or equal to 13. So if I were to do 2, that won't submit. If I were to submit 190 years, that should be less than 120. But if I were to do it 45, let's say, then it should allow me to submit the form, and it does. Adding a drop down to the form is easy with the select element. The select element is a container for a group of option elements, and the option element acts as a label for each drop down option. Both elements require closing tags. Okay. Okay, below the two label elements, what we are going to do is add a new select element. Let's close the select, and this will render a drop down in here. So right now we don't have any options and the drop down is very small. So now what we can do is we have to nest 5 option elements. Okay, so there is one option with empty value, so this option has no value. So 1 2 3 4 5. Yeah, so it will render 5 options, but these options do not have any value yet. So I think in the next exercise we are going to add some values to those options. Nest the select element with its option elements within a label element. Okay, so now what we need to do is nest this select inside a label. And we do this, and let's indent them so they look better. And this will have a text: how did you hear about us? Yeah. The text should come before the select element. It does come before the select element, so this should be good to go. Okay, the drop down options are currently empty. To give them content, add the following text to each subsequent element. Okay, so the first is going to be select one, second freeCodeCamp news, third is going to be freeCodeCamp YouTube channel, or fourth is going to be freeCodeCamp forum, and fifth is going to be other. Yeah, so now we see these values in here, and the first option is selected by default. Okay, let's go to the next challenge. Submitting the form with an option selected would not send a useful value to the server. As such, each options need to be given a value attribute. So each of these option elements here, they need to be given a value attribute, without which the text content of the option will be submitted to the server. Yeah, so what would be submitted is this text content. Give the first option a value of empty, so this is like this, and the subsequent option elements and the subsequent option elements value attributes from 1 to 4. Okay, so value is going to be, this is going to be option 1. I'm just going to copy this and this is going to be 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so I still see the labels is defined inside the option, but when I submit this form, instead of submitting this freeCodeCamp news or freeCodeCamp YouTube channel text, what it will submit is this either empty or 1, 2, 3, 4 text. The text area element acts like an input element of type text, but comes with the added benefit of being able to receive multi-line text and an initial number of text rows and columns. Okay, so users will be able to register with a bio, add a label with the text, provide a bio at the end of the field set. So here let's add a label, and this label is going to have a text, provide a bio, and then the next is going to be, I didn't mean to do that. Next is going to be text area, and it requires a closing tag, and it should be nested inside the label. So if I click here, then it should be focused. Okay, why is it rendering this last label in there? I close the text area here. Okay. I'll try that again. Okay. Requires a closing tag, but it cannot be self-closed. I didn't know that. So okay, yeah, that was the case. So text area cannot be self-closed, so it requires the closing tag. Otherwise it will behave weirdly. Yeah, so now I think we should be good to go. Link the applicable form elements and their label elements together. So for profile picture, this is going to be for profile picture, and this is going to have the ID of profile picture. This is going to have for A's, and this is going to have an ID A's. This is going to have for a referrer, and this is going to have an ID of a referrer, and this is going to have an ID of for attribute set to bio and ID set to bio. So if I click here, it focuses here. If I click here, yeah. The text area appears too small. To give it an initial size, you can add rows and calls attributes. So let's give this text area initial rows is going to be 3 and calls is going to be 30, which is going to make it slightly bigger to give campers an idea of what to put in their view. The placeholder attribute is used. Okay, so we can give a placeholder attribute to this text area, and I like coding on the beach. Okay, yeah, as soon as the user starts typing, the placeholder text disappears, and as soon as the text area or input is empty, then this placeholder is displayed. With form submissions, it is useful and good practice to provide each submittable element with a name attribute. This attribute is used to identify the element in the form submission. Give each submittable element a unique name attribute of your choosing, except for the two radio inputs. I think we have already given the name for the radio inputs, so this is account type. Now what it says is submittable element, so this first name input is a submittable element, so let's find that. It is in here, and then let's give it a name of first name. This is going to be last name, another submittable element, and I'm going to give the name attribute same as the ID. So email name is new, password. Here we already have the name attributes. For profile picture, this is going to have a name of profile picture. This is going to have the name of age, and this is going to have a name of a referrer, and this is going to have a name of bio, and also this is going to have a name of terms and conditions. Yeah. Okay, the HTML for the registration form is finished. Now you can spruce it up a little bit. Start by changing the font to Tahoma and the font size to 16 pixels in body. Okay, let's change the font family to Tahoma, and the font size is going to be 16 pixels, and I cannot change it is equals to, I have to do, yep, but did it change the font? No, it didn't. Oh yeah, we don't have the Tahoma font available yet, so yeah. Center H1 and P elements by giving them a margin of 1 EM and auto. Okay, so H1 and P elements are going to be having this kind of margin, so they are centered, but they are not. Then align their text into center as well. Okay, text align center. Yeah, so now this is centered. Center the form element by giving it a margin of 0 and auto. So we select the form element, we select the margin property. It won't have any top or bottom margins, but it will have the left and right set to auto. So now when we do maximum width, to 500 pixels, then it's going to occupy only maximum width. Maxi MXIMUM. Is it max width? Yeah. Oh, okay. Then width is going to be 60 viewport width. And the minimum width is going to be 300 pixels. Okay. So now our form is centered and has a fixed width. During development, it is useful to see the field set default borders. However, they make the content appear too separated. Okay. So remove the border and add 2 rem of padding only to the top and bottom of the field set. So in the field set element, what we are going to do is we are going to do border none. That removes the border. Now we are going to add padding, and in the top and bottom we are going to add 2 rem padding and no padding on the left and right. So now this separates each of these field sets. To give the field set elements a bit of separation, select them and give them a border bottom of 3 pixels. Okay, so let's go on and border bottom 3 pixels solid as 3b3 b4f. Okay, so there is that separation. The border of the last field set element looks a little out of place. You can select the last element of a specific type using the last of type pseudo class like this. Okay, this will select the last p element, create a new selector that targets the last field set element and set its border bottom to none. So let's select p and last of not p. We want to select field set element and last of type, and we want to remove the border button. What did I do wrong here? Okay. There is no closing. Yeah, so this curly was not closed, that's why it was not working. Okay, now the border bottom of the last field set it's gone. It would be nicer to have the label text appear above the form elements. Okay, it would be nicer to have the label text appear above the form elements. Yeah, select all input. So right now the label elements are rendering side by side with the form elements. So maybe what it's suggesting is like we will have this enter your first name text here, and then on the new line we will have the text box. So select all input text area and select elements. So and make them take up the full width of their parent elements. One way we could do that is we could say display block width 100%. Yeah, and margin 10 pixels of margin to the top of the selected. So margin top is going to be 10 pixels. Set other margins to 0. So other margins are 0, but what I can do is I can be explicit about that and set margin 0, and then yeah. For the second field set, you want the input and label text to appear on the same line. Okay, here in this case, start by giving the input elements in the second field set a class of inline. Okay, so input elements of the second, they will have a class of inline. Select only the inline elements dot inline and give them width of onset. Yeah, this will remove the earlier rule which set all input widths to 100%. Okay, yeah, let's go to the next challenge. Add some space between the inline elements and the label text by giving a right margin of 0.5 em. So margin right of 0.5 em. Set all other margins to 0. So let's set all other margins to 0. Yeah, so this has to be done, this setting all other margins to 0, this has to be done before setting the margin right. Otherwise, if we were to do this after, then this thing will be overridden by this rule. So margin right, at first we gave margin right 0.5 em to this inline element, then immediately after that we reset all sides, so this includes top, bottom, right and left. So we are resetting all the margins to 0. So this rule will no longer be applied, it will be overridden by this one. So this has to appear before this margin right. If you look close enough, you will notice the inline elements are too high on the line. To combat this, set the vertical align property to middle. Okay, so vertical align to middle, and so these things are vertically aligned to the middle here. Yeah, and I think I'm going to stop recording for today, so I will continue on day 6, and I will finish this HTML form tomorrow.